Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, PBM, Customers Bank, Collins Building Services, AmTrust Title Insurance Company, Marks Paneth, Capital One Bank. Additional funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from Immigrant Bank, Bank of America, Citizens Bank, Dime Community Bank, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties LLC Handler Real Estate Organization, Hodges Ward Elliott Inc., Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Catsimatidis Red Apple Group, Keysight Capital Partners, New Banks, Meridian Capital Group, Ocean First Bank, People's United Bank, RPW Group, TD Bank, and these friends. The Lower East Side of Manhattan, Henry Street Settlement House, Hunter High School, Hunter Elementary School, the Greenwood Camp, a variety of places. Maybe I'll get involved with the violin and piano. Maybe I'll get involved with science. I don't know. Perhaps I'll go to Harvard. I'm going to get involved with neurology. I'm going to then get into Harvard Medical School, then New York Cornell, Columbia University, Mount Sinai School of Medicine. But in the middle, writing numerous books, 2 textbooks at least, probably 1,500 articles, seeing 600 new patients last year. I have the famous Dr. Stephen Frucht, who is the Institute Director at the Fresco Institute for Movement Disorders and Parkinson's Disease at the NYU Langone Health. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit about your parents, your grandparents first, and then we'll go to your parents.
Sure. Well, my dad's dad came from a place called Galicia, and all 4 of my grandparents were Ellis Island immigrants at the turn of the century. And he came over at the age of 11 alone on a boat and arrived at Ellis Island in 1905. And he met my grandmother in the Lower East Side, and they eventually settled in Brooklyn, and then had my dad, and my mom's parents had a similar trajectory.
So tell me a bit about your dad. Your dad was born in 1924, I believe you told me.
Right. So both of my parents were teachers in the New York City public school system. My dad did what many bright kids then did. He went to City University of New York at 16. And then when he graduated, he had to go to work. So he went and immediately became a teacher, and he taught math and science and physics and everything at Manhattan Vocational Tech School and then Aviation Trade. And he later got a master's in mathematics at the Courant Institute. And my mom went to NYU and actually almost finished a doctorate in economics, but then got married and had kids. But then she taught in the New York City public school systems too.
Now, was there involvement with music? Your father involved? He was a self-taught pianist, I think you told me.
Yeah. So the family lore was that on his side, way back, there were musicians who were lost in the Second World War. They were wiped out. But he had innate musical ability for sure. He harmonized with friends when he was a kid. And when my sister and I both were being exposed to music, he taught himself how to play the piano. And then when I started taking violin lessons, he taught himself how to play the violin reasonably well, which is kind of amazing to think about.
So how they moved from Brighton Beach, which was an enclave of many immigrants and Jewish individuals over there, to the
Right.
Lower East Side, to the Mitchell Lama housing, the village housing?
They moved in when the Village View Co-op opened. This concept of the Mitchell-Lama low-income housing to allow people to live in Manhattan and to afford it, who, you didn't make a lot of money being a teacher, was very, and still is, a wonderfully respected profession, but that's what they did. And so they lived there their whole lives. My mom passed away 2 years ago, but she lived there 55 years.
So let's talk about you growing up on the Lower East Side and music being a favorite, and then science because you were a Westinghouse scholar and, some others. Tell me about the music, how you got involved to be so involved with music.
Well, I don't know for sure exactly. I think I was told that when my parents were putting me to sleep, if they put a record on of Eine kleine Nachtmusik of Mozart, and when it stopped, I would cry. And so I think they then took me to the Henry Street Settlement House, and I started piano and had aptitude in it. Turned out I had perfect pitch, so I could recognize the frequencies. And when I was about 10, it was sort of suggested to me, maybe you would want to add the violin. And so I did. And probably in retrospect, that was late. 10 is late, but I probably had more innate physical gift for the violin than the piano. But it was a very, I spent hours every day throughout most of my childhood practicing and going to schools. And
now you went to Hunter Elementary and Hunter High School.
Right. From the elementary wasn't yet up at the 94th Street in that fortress where it is now, but it moved up there and then was there for high school. Fantastic school, wonderful environment, and very, very bright kids. And quite a number of them also were involved in music. They had a wonderful orchestra and chamber music and other activities.
So when did you get involved with with science during this period of time? Because you were also very involved with that, especially the Westinghouse scholar.
Yeah, I started working actually not far from where I'm sitting now in the office at the New York Public Health Research Institute, which is right near where Bellevue is. They had a program for high school students to get exposure to working in labs in the afternoons, and I started doing that, and eventually was paired up with a wonderful scientist, Leonard Bernstein, who took me into his lab, and I did a project, and lo and behold, I got to go down to Washington, D.C. and see all sorts of very well-known people, and even we visited the White House, and it was quite a scene.
Let's talk about summer camp, because that has an effect later on in your life also, the
Right.
Greenwood Camp.
So the Greenwood Music Camp is this amazing place that's been in existence now for over 80 years. And it's in Cummington, Massachusetts, and it's a very wonderful place with the focuses on chamber music, which is probably the greatest music in the classical music repertoire. And I spent 2 summers there when I was turning 15 and 16. And it was one of the defining moments of my childhood. And I met, and later we got together. I met my wife there, who was a camper those summers.
And what's your wife's specialty, Rachel Riggs?
She is a professional musician. She went to Eastman and then to Minnesota for grad school. She's a violist and plays in the American Symphony, and also teaches quite actively both violin and viola.
So let's get to the point. I mean, you're in high school, as I said, you had the scientist point of view, you had the music. How did you decide to go to Harvard?
Well, I mean, I was lucky. I applied, and truthfully, it was easier to apply back then. The competition wasn't as fierce. I did have a number of offers. The financial aid offers, as they are now, were very similar. I had visited once, but I guess I was swayed. The offer used to come in the mail, and it had a picture on it with filigree and saying, "Oh, you've been accepted, and you have this named scholarship." And I thought, that sounds great to me. And little did I know that I was lucky to get into the med school and the scholarship carried over. So I was not riddled with terrible debt when I got out of the medical school.
Now, as I have alluded, you were heavily involved with music. You could have been, and you were involved. You performed at Tanglewood with Leonard Bernstein. You have been involved with others. You were in a junction in your life of
Right.
of deciding which is the career path to go. How
Right.
medicine went out versus music.
This is a juncture that many kids face, and my kids were fortunate to go to Juilliard Pre-College too and faced it. I think the truth is that I had other interests besides music. I think I wasn't prepared to give them up completely. I probably had quite a bit of fear of the uncertainties of being a musician. I was always going to try to go to a university and continue music. I suppose I could have then become a musician, but you know, the interest in science was pretty strong.
Now, as I said, you did go to Juilliard, and you
Right.
also got involved. Let's talk about Tanglewood and Leonard Bernstein.
Well, I was really, really lucky because I auditioned for this amazing fellowship program in the summers in 1988, and I was graduating, but I was going to enroll in med school, and they let me in. So I got to participate fully, and then I got invited back in 89 and 90, and that was a remarkable time at the festival because those were the last 3 summers of Bernstein's life, and the chamber music faculty there was incredible. And it was being immersed playing a concert every week in either the performance space or the shed, and living the life of a musician for those 3 summers.
Now you're at medical school, okay, and you have a juncture also to determine what field that you could have. How do you decide to be involved with neurology?
I think when I went to med school, I thought I would do hematology. And then I had like many students who end up in neurology, in their second year, they take the neuroscience course. And I was very intrigued by several things. I was really intrigued by the organization of the nervous system. And I think I was also intrigued by some of the questions that draw people to the field about consciousness, about thought, about movement, motor control. And back then, neurology was not a particularly competitive field either. There were only 3 or 4 students who went into it from each graduating class. But it was sort of a field that was and is proven to be ripe for therapeutics.
Now, had you known Oliver Sacks at that time?
No, I'd read his classic book, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, and of course, who didn't love to read those books, but I didn't know him then.
Okay, so you told me you did a 5-year program in medical school. Tell me what you.
So I did spend the next year because the program I went to through Harvard and MIT was very research oriented. Most students either did a PhD or an extra research year. And that year I spent working with 2 wonderful mentors, Dennis Selko and Eddie Koo, in the basic science Alzheimer's lab. And I thought, okay, this is what I'm probably going to end up doing after residency, go back into a lab and try to get grants and make a career being a basic scientist. But in the end, as happens to many when you're exposed to patients and their stories in the exam, and your interests change.
Was it Fred Plum at New York Cornell, New York Hospital, who took you under his wings?
Yeah. Well, I had to come back to New York. My dad got very ill. I made a decision to come back, and I interviewed only at 3 places. I had never been at New York Hospital because I grew up on the Lower East Side, and just took the bus or the subway up to Hunter. And he was an amazing man and somewhat controversial figure. Sometimes he marched to his own beat. I met him at the interview, and he asked me directly, "What are you looking for?" And I thought for a second, just said, well, I might as well just tell him. I said, I'm looking to come to New York. And the next thing he said was, okay, I'm prepared to offer you a position. Now there was a residency ruling and you're not supposed to say that, but he did say that. But he turned out to be a really inspirational figure. Both he and Jerry Posner at Memorial Sloan Kettering were these figures that trained several generations of neurologists there in how to approach problems in medicine and how to think mechanistically.
You spent what, 6 or 7 years at New York Cornell?
Just for internship and 3 years of neurology.
Okay, and then it was Stanley Fahn at Columbia.
Right. So I got interested in movement disorders. I spent, as most residents did when they wanted to get exposure to the various disorders you see, I spent a month observing up at Columbia Presbyterian, and that was the Mecca. They had that division was like a department at most institutions. There were like 8 or 10 neurology attendings who were all movement disorder experts, and Stan was incredible. And when I saw those patients and saw him, like many people who've had this experience, I thought, that's it. This is what I would love to be doing. So I did train there in fellowship and then stayed on as a junior faculty.
Now, the fellowship was in movement disorders?
Right. So it's a really sort of like a guild-like training. And we do that now. I do that. I've been privileged to do that for the last 20 years. So people who finish their residency, they spend a year or two basically seeing patients with the attendings, taking care of them, and learning how to be an expert in the field.
You know, let's talk about how you got involved with a number of musicians who had this condition called dystonia.
Dystonia, right. So that, you know, when I was at Tanglewood, the director was Leon Fleischer, and arguably the greatest American pianist of the 20th century. And at 36, it was known by then that he had this disorder called focal dystonia that affected his right hand. It began with playing the piano and then actually spread to rest. But his hand was like this throughout the summers when I knew him and was privileged to work with him. And I rotated in med school at a musician clinic in Boston at the Mass General Hospital. And so it's some exposure to dystonia patients. And once I was a fellow, one of the patients I saw was a man named Glenn Estrin, who's become one of my closest friends. So he was the horn player for French horn for Frank Sinatra and subbed all over the place in major orchestras and was a major player on Broadway. And he developed this condition of dystonia in his jaw. And it ended his playing career. He came just seeking help, had been going to various people for about 6 years without a diagnosis. And we saw him and diagnosed him. And he, said, it took me all this time. There must be other people out there like this. Why don't we write a little article for the musician paper, union paper? And so we did. And then all these people started coming out of the woodwork. So with his initiative, we started this organization called Musicians with Dystonia to help patients get appropriately diagnosed and treated as part of the Dystonia Medical Research Foundation. And Glenn assembled many of his friends on the advisory board, and Glenn asked personally Leon to join. And not only did he join, but then he became sort of the spokesperson, the most famous person still who's developed this condition. The amazing thing was that when he got treated at NIH by my colleagues with botulinum toxin injection, he was able to recover quite a bit of use in the hand and reclaim some of the two-hand piano literature and even make recordings.
Now, was Glenn able to recover also?
He was not. He developed it in the jaw, and it spread to his speech. So there was a risk if he went back to playing that it might come back. He had a spontaneous remission of all things, which was incredible. But he had done, as he said, he'd done everything he wanted to do in music, played all over the world. So he was content.
Now, how how'd you meet Oliver later on? Now, Oliver Sacks, with
Well,
regard.
that was like many. I wrote to him about a patient who I'd encountered who was very similar to one of his patients in Awakenings. And he wrote back and then asked if I would meet him. So I went down to his apartment on Horatio Street and met him, and it was wonderful. And I began sort of a correspondence with him. He had, Oliver had hundreds of friends all over the world who wrote to him. He didn't like the phone, he preferred it. So I got to meet with him. He actually joined the advisory board of the foundation, and he then met Leon, and actually a chapter of his book, Musicophilia, is on meeting Leon and on seeing him play at his own piano. It's very moving.
So let's talk about you're finishing Columbia. How did you decide to go to Mount Sinai?
Well, a little push and pull. The opportunity arose, and I took it, and it was, in retrospect, a good move, as was the move I made when I left Sinai. One of the best pieces of advice I think I received a long while ago is that sometimes you just have to take a risk and try something a little bit that may not be so comfortable, because you may have opportunities for you. And that's proven, fortunately, to be true for me.
Now, you said before that when you were going for the residency, there were like 4 to 5 people who were in neurology, but that has changed. What do you attribute the change?
Oh, I think what's changed is the fact that this specialty used to be thought of as you'd observe something and you couldn't help people. But the last 25 years, the pharmacologic and surgical treatments of epilepsy and movement disorders and headache and stroke have exploded. And so this is now a therapeutic field, a true therapeutic field. And so, of course, that attracts the attention of students. There's always going to be students who are interested in the, quote, big problems of consciousness and thought and intention. But now, with many of the disorders that were untreatable, they can be treated now.
Let's talk about the Fresco Institute.
Yes. So I was very fortunate. I came here 3.5 years ago, and my colleague Andy Fagan came at the same time. And this institute allows us to have a floor of the outpatient building devoted just to patients with movement disorders. And we have a comprehensive unit with clinical trials and translational research projects, and also services for the patients, and to help them with social work and, if needed, palliative care. And it's a 360-degree sort of arrangement, and with collaborations with basic scientists here and also in Italy. And some of the Italian neurology residents actually rotate with us and become fellows here, and we train them and then they go back. So it's a terrific collaboration.
Now, in the middle of this, and as I said, last year in 2020, you did see 600 patients from your CV.
Yeah.
Okay. How did you decide to write the second book? Because you didn't.
The second book, yeah. The second book was on movement disorder phenomenology. So, phenomenology sort of gets a bad rap. People think, oh, well, you're just describing what you're seeing, etc. But actually, movement disorders, that's everything. We make diagnoses and therapeutic decisions based on our history and examination. And it's been a subject of fascination for me. And I put it together with a former fellow, and we actually wrote it as opposed to getting authors to contribute chapters. And it has many, many patient videos, examples, and all. I don't know if anybody will buy it or read it, but
it's on Amazon. I know it's on Amazon. So let's talk a little bit about Rachel and the girls, because I think I read an article saying that you probably could have a quartet or a symphony with the members of the Frucht family.
Well, yeah, we've been blessed. I mean, I think, the truth is, if when we've tried to play together, after 20 or 30 minutes, there can be some screaming. So we try not to get too too hot under the collar. But no, we were blessed with three girls, and they went to public school in the city here, and we're very fortunate they all got an amazing education at Juilliard Pre-College, two violinists and one cellist. And my oldest, Emma, has decided to do it professionally. She went to Harvard and then came back to Juilliard for a master's. Middle daughter played cello at Penn, Claire, and is now working in media. And the youngest is at Harvard as a violinist, but she's decided to be pre-med.
Now, I have a question. Do you continue to play yourself?
I did do mostly piano for the last decade because I was making an attempt to be their accompanist, sometimes successfully, occasionally not so successfully, but it was an amazing experience to accompany their lessons and recitals. And now I'm getting more back into playing the violin. There's an orchestra that before the pandemic I had just joined called Camerata Notturna that is a very, very, very high level and was giving 4 concerts a year. And so that was a real pleasure.
How did your parents react when you decided to become a neurologist?
The truth is that they had absolutely no opinion. Once I got into, med school, as long as I finished and did something, it didn't matter what it was. It absolutely didn't matter.
The best part is the world of music has been lucky with you, Rachel, and the kids and the people that you've been involved with. And I think the field of medicine, especially the people who are treated at the NYU Langone Health with the Fresno Institute, are lucky to have you and your colleagues. And thanks for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me.